Are the economic concerns for growth companies as dire as they seem? Perhaps. If not, though, we have a lot to talk about candidate experience. We'll explain this week in this week's Culture Builder Live. Hey, I am Chris Wink. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. I'm coming to you again from my basement lair because my beautiful home recording studio has been dismantled by a house project. So that's why there's a strange fern behind me crash into a wall. Thank you for being here. This week, we're talking about candidate experience, but it's going to come at an interesting time because, of course, there are breathless reports around whether we're concerned about the economic outlook to come. We're going to talk a bit about that too. To do that, I'm joined by Cliff Jurkiewicz. He's the VP of Global Strategy at Phenom. They're a talent experience platform company, about 1,800 people. We've covered Phenom for years. Cliff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Really enjoy the show. I'm a big fan, so thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have you. Yeah, we've always enjoyed Phenom's research. You guys have a new State of Candidate Experience report out that we're going to talk about, and post-event, we'll drop the link below the video. But start me off here. You at Phenom, you guys work with tons of growth companies and companies all around. We are trying to get a handle on just how dire the economic outlook is. Can you start me there? Because you're talking about candidate experience. If I'm worried about my economic growth, maybe I shouldn't even be listening to you. Why are we even talking about candidate experience? How bad does it look like to you?
Yeah, I think, the way that I would put this is I sort of compare it to what happened in April of 2020 when COVID hit and, everyone thought that the bottom was going to drop out. And for about 6 to 8 weeks, there's this period of just, serious uncertainty and many companies holding their breath, many people in companies holding their breath. Others saw that as an opportunity and they took action. And they turned on, just from a Phenom perspective, turned on, new features and functions to engage the gigs and automated interview scheduling, just to be prepared for that uncertainty. And, ramping that new tech up from an engagement perspective was very helpful because the bottom didn't drop out. There were certainly pockets of challenges that required some attention, but, there's very, very high demand for talented people that will always exist, regardless of market conditions. And the best approach to uncertainty is, think like a scout, is to be prepared. Not sitting on the sidelines and waiting for things to happen. There's little to no risk in being well prepared for the recruiting market ahead, regardless of what it holds for us. So I would use the most recent example of how we responded to COVID. And what didn't happen as a marker of what's ahead.
A CEO I recently interviewed put it as it's hard to punch from a defensive scout, defensive position. They use a different word, but I've just lost it. The takeaway being that you can be overly correct. The other concept that I have come across a bunch in economic reporting over 15 years is typically the threat that's most in front of you is not the most dangerous one. It's the sword you do not see that threatens you. And obviously the 2020 example was a clear one, right? Like few were considering a global pandemic as being an outsized risk to their business operations. Then suddenly it was everyone's concern, but that upturn came so quick. It's different now. There was a considerable splash of fiscal stimulus in 2020. There's a lot of strange outliers to that economic rebound. Just to pause for a moment on here, Cliff. If I'm a growth stage company, relatively large company, we're talking, how do I balance looking at my future versus wariness of economic conditions? I'm just kind of curious what you guys are advising clients. If you're saying, hey, you have to be thinking about your candidate experience, you have to be thinking about how you grow and retain. If I'm nervous, that might sound like a strange focus of mine right now. I mean, just push me a little bit more on why it should remain one.
Yeah, I think it can be, uncomfortable to approach it from that lens, but there are two, I think, really important factors involved of why you want to focus and continue to focus and invest on candidate experience. The first is that candidates are consumers. And they're likely consumers of your brand, especially if you have a very large presence in the market. And if you don't, even more important, to support that brand as a company that wants to not just survive, what's ahead of us, but, grow and thrive in it. And so, candidates being consumers first are going to judge the candidate experience, not only based on the experience itself, but how it represents your brand. And so it's an important fact to know that I think the number is on average about 99.6, 99.7 of all of your site visitors, career site visitors, your applicants, anyone that's touching, your job search, they're not going to get the job, right? You're going to hire a select few, but they're still going to know your brand. So I think that that's really important to understand first, that candidates are still consumers. And because they are consumers, there's an expectation, and this is part two, there's an expectation in how that experience plays out. And this is one of the reasons why for 6 years now, we've done this State of the Candidate Experience report, looking at the Fortune 500, looking also at the European market, and trying to help leaders in these organizations understand, where their best opportunity is. And it is all focused on that idea of serving the brand and being able to deliver expected experiences from a candidate perspective.
Let's use that as our segue to State of Candidate Experience report. If you're watching this this video after the fact, we'll drop the link before. It'll also be in the full technical recap. But Cliff, start me with the high level takeaways from the State of Candidate Experience report.
Sure, I'll give you a few. Yeah, I think, and there's a lot in this report to unpack. We make it very digestible, but I'll give you three that I think are really important, that stand out to me. The first is that 1 in 10 companies in the Fortune 100 use intuitive job search and have a unified apply process. And so this is really important because there's a lot of opportunity there to improve search, to unify the candidate experience in a way that is leading them through that process versus them having to discover or be redirected through it. A very important fact: every time you make a candidate click on something unnecessarily, you lose 50% of that audience. And so you lose 50, you lose 50. You do 3 clicks, right? And now you're left with 10 or 12% of the audience that you started with. And that's just by sheer lack of unifying that candidate experience. So that's a really important one. Probably the biggest thing that I would say is improve search and unify the candidate experience between the
Cliff, can you just help me just get there with intuitive search? Give me that example of like what's the difference in that career site, which is what I think.
So let's move beyond keyword, right? Like if you think about Google, for those of us that are old enough to have been the first Google users in 1996, showing my age here, it was strictly keyword based, right? And it was very, very difficult to find information. They were indexing information. They were indexing 1 million keywords an hour. It was like this crazy number that they were indexing, but it was all keywords. Now you look at what Google has done with semantic search, which has been applied to everything. So that familiar type ahead search that we have, where it is understanding your intention. And that's really what this level of personalization looks like at search, is to understand your intention, help make predictions as to where you want to be based on where you are. And that is incredibly important. A lot of the technology that's out there, so the standard technology that comes with a lot of the ATSs and practically speaking, many of the recruiting products out there, is based on keyword. So you're essentially saying to the candidate, go back to 1996 and do it the way that we did it, a couple decades ago. And what you're saying to the candidate is actually deeper than that. You're saying it's not important enough for us to modify this experience and modernize it in a way that you, the candidate, are used to. That whole type ahead predictive technology. So it's a really important, and it is a little bit of I'm throwing a gauntlet down because this is such an easy thing to fix.
Okay. All right. What else you got?
So 2 other things that I think are important. Only 1% communicated application status. And that's really important because when we think about automations, right? automations are what are going to allow recruiters to scale and understand the mass amounts of data that platforms like Phenom can generate. Like, what do I do with all this data? And so automations are really important. Candidate status is probably one of the most critical. What stage in the process are you? How many times have you communicated to a candidate, I have a job opening for you, and they're already in an interview process? What does that say to the candidate? It says that, hey, you guys are a little bit disorganized. But even more important than that is the ability to make that candidate feel like you've created the experience for them, right? So that hyper personalization based on status, the candidate may not even know that it's based on status, but they're going to an interview. Hey, I'm gonna send out an automated communication that's gonna introduce you to the team. Here's some things that they're working on, some important information that could be useful in your interview process, right? We want to educate you because we're hopefully creating a lasting trusted relationship. Right. So that piece is really important, communicating status, but also attaching engaging content to it. The last thing I'll talk about is, and this is such an obvious one, I'm befuddled, as my mother would say, I'm befuddled why you do these things. It is that 3 out of 4 of the Fortune 500 don't offer the ability to save jobs. And then you think about, again, candidates as consumers, we save everything in our Amazon cart or eBay or name the consumer experience that we've got, and you're always able to save stuff, come back to it. Why can't you do that for jobs? That's a little thing that you can do that they don't have to go back. I saw this really great job, on X company, but I don't remember the keywords that I used to search it, so it's tied to search, right? I don't remember the keywords I used. I didn't save it. I'm not even going to bother, right? And that's versus the other, which is I'm coming back to that career site. It's right there. Yep, that's the job. I want it. Going to click apply, and I'm going for it.
Mm-hmm. The idea here of technology being used to improve candidate experience, I've always, one thing that I've struggled with is we are in this cycle at times with one-click apply job sites, that as we make it easier for more people to apply, logically people who are less connected to that job are applying. This is the story that we've all heard of. You end up getting 500 applicants for a role and none of them are even qualified, but we made it very easy. And I feel like a lot of our platforms are putting band-aids around it. We're adding these little obstacles to try to slow people down. We're putting speed bumps in. And I've struggled with this. And I guess I'm just curious, my understanding is that an economist might say the dream scenario is that there's only one applicant for every job, right? That you would say there's actually one person is so uniquely qualified for this job. There's only one. Do you think candidate experience can get us to a better world where we're not so overwhelmed? I feel like each technical intervention just adds to the noise. Did any of these steps take away some of the noise?
They do, because and I would say, when we start working with a client at Phenom, we often see 4 to 6 applicants and interviews per role. And our job and where we average out at is about, with using our technology, is to go to about 1.5 applicant and interviews per role. So we are, Chris, whittling that down. But I don't want to make it sound like we are excluding people from work. It's actually the opposite. We are opting people in with our technology to say, hey, Chris, you're qualified for this specific job. Like, you're such a great match. We're going to tell you why you're a good match. We're going to explain the artificial intelligence and machine learning behind it, because that can be a big, scary thing, especially with how social media is viewed in terms of how they've applied AI in fairly negative ways. In recruiting, it's been very positive. I want to apply for a job where I know my chances are better. The recruiter seeing that data says, yep, Chris is really, like, all these elements, if you've got configurable AI, which we do, I've configured this role after consulting with the hiring manager. Here are the specific things that we're looking for: skills, interests, location, level of experience. These are really important attributes that we look at. And then you add the element of of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And there are things that we can do outside of AI. We don't use that in our AI, but these are important things that we have to understand how diverse our funnel is. And the technologies are helping us understand these audiences and how these funnels are configured, not only at those attribute levels, but the people that we're attracting into those funnels. So I think this is a really important point because data is just getting bigger. More people are applying to jobs. More people are mobile. You're looking at 1 to 3 years. Somebody on average is in a role, and then they're looking for something different, either inside the organization or maybe they're looking outside. So there's a lot of movement of these talented people in organizations. So how else are you supposed to help a recruiter understand what that intelligence looks like? Because the data sets are pretty massive. And that's what we do. So yeah, time to hire is an important one. Number of interviews per hire is important. Number of applicants per open role is important because you want to make it very, very easy for the recruiter to understand where they sit.
You already have run through a bunch of specifics, and I wanted to close out, which we will be closing out here in a moment, with some specifics. You already hit on a bunch of them, and by the way, we dropping here, one of our listeners dug that response there, so shout outs, Cliff. Thanks, Edward. The tension in well, you hit on this idea of shortened tenure, and some of the in the numbers that's not as big a change as sometimes we assume it is. It's about age demographic, but it makes me think, do you think shortened tenure at companies is a problem that we should be addressing, or is this just a generational shift that informs why candidate experience becomes so important? We're talking so much about boomerang employees. We're talking about how do you have a stronger alumni network because you might have folks who are networking. Should we be combating shorter tenures, or it's part of the trend and we should be finding new tools to work around that?
I think I'll try to be brief in my answer because that's a very deep question, but I think it boils down to a couple of high level things. The first is, what is the culture of the company? In terms of, is it a predefined culture and we want people to fit into it? Or at Phenom, it's I think a good example here as we try to help 1 billion people find the right job. Even in our own recruiting, we don't have a predefined cultures. We have values that we really lean on as the basis, guiding principles, if you will. But we don't have a predetermined culture. We want people to come in and contribute and help that culture evolve into who knows what. We don't know where it's going to go, but as long as we stick to our values, like, please. And that's that sense of belonging, which I think is really important. It plays into what you're talking about, because when you do that, when you have this inclusive, diverse, belonging culture, people don't want to leave it. And that's a really important point. Or if they leave it and they think the grass is greener somewhere else, and they realize, no, that was something really, really special there. So that's one. And the second part is, people are always going to move around based on experience. You may not have a role or work that is meaningful for someone as they advance their career. I would say, be bold and brave. Help them connect with organizations that may be able to help them advance their career. Organizations that do this, those people boomerang back and come back to the organization and say, now I want to bring that experience back because I loved working here so much, right? I just couldn't get this experience anywhere else. And now I want to bring it back to the organization. So yeah, people are going to move around, but if you've got a culture of belonging and you look outside in, which is, I'm here to support you. You're going to do some great work, help me grow my business. And in return, even if it means I've got to give you up, I'm always going to be there to support you.
Cliff, thoughtful way to go out. That's Cliff Jurkiewicz, the VP of Global Strategy at Phenom. Cliff, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Chris.
We'll make sure to drop links below to the State of Candidate Experience report from Phenom. It'll also be in the Technically Recap story. And if you're watching this after it's live, you can click right here to see additional Culture Builder live interviews. Cliff, thanks again, and we'll see all of you next week. See you. Bye. See everyone. Bye is what I intended to say. Bye.